Welcome to today's edition of Mental Health Matter. Today, we're going to be talking about the LGBTQ community. I have Pashi Walk on the show today, and Pashi will share the experience identifying with the LGBTQ community. Get you something to drink and get you a snack and come on back. All right, Pashi, welcome back to the show. How are you doing this morning?
Good. I just realized though, I don't have a drink or a snack. So that was good advice.
Yeah, I have some water somewhere around here, but you may see me tip off and get it and then come back. Because normally when I do these interviews, sometimes I'm talking, my mouth get dry, and I put on some chapstick before we started just to keep my lip a little moist. So we'll see how that goes. All right, Pasha, let's start off by you kind of telling the audience a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what you do.
So I'm the LGBTQ program director for Cal Voices. And as part of the work that I do, I advocate for LGBTQ communities. And notice I say communities because we are not just one monolithic, everybody's the same. We're made up of multiple groups of people. I also do community-based research. And I do community organizing and that type of and policy work.
Wow, that's a lot. So, Pashi, how did you get into this particular field, being an advocate for the LGBTQ community?
It is kind of unintentional. I was getting my master's degree in social work, and I wound up working at the Sacramento LGBT Center as part of my internship. And I met Susan there, who's our executive director of Cal Voices.
Yes.
And she said, "Hey, I'd like to offer you a job." And I said, "Hey, I'm still in graduate school." And she said, "That's okay. We won't work you too many hours until you graduate." And so it was a project to improve mental health services for LGBTQ transition age youth in Sacramento County. And that's how I got my start. It wasn't where I planned to be. I had wanted to be a therapist.
Yeah.
And then right when that job was ending, we won a contract for me to become the program manager of the LGBTQ California Reducing Disparities Project Phase 1. And that lasted for 5 years. And once I was on that path, it was hard to go back.
Yeah, nice, nice. So how long have you been with the agency?
I've been with Cal Voices over 13 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting. That's a long stretch right there. Although I will say you would have made an extremely good therapist as well. I think.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I do. I will tell you that unofficially, I have coached multiple parents whose kids are coming out, either as lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, etc., or as along the trans spectrum. And so I have talked them through because it is a challenge for a lot of parents. And so even though I'm not doing therapy, I am doing counseling, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
So that I was going to kind of go into that a little bit, so we can just go ahead and just shoot from here. Why do you think it's important that family members or loved ones receive some type of coaching or mentor or even education when they have a loved one, especially the youth who is potentially in the closet and want to come out, but they're fearful to do so? Why is that? Why is it important to have that component, meaning that to have someone to really kind of help the loved one, through the process?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So unfortunately, many parents have internalized, and family members have internalized very negative messages about what it means to be LGBT or Q. And they're concerned for their child. There's also a religious component. So, you have to honor the fact that for some parents, there is this true belief that if their child is gay or trans, that they will go to hell and then won't be with the family in eternity. And there's also some people believe it's a mental illness and they think that it's something that needs to be cured. So there's all kinds of messages that people have received. Some of it is also they're ashamed. They think maybe it's something they did wrong as a parent. And then there's just the expectations that we have of our children.
Yeah.
Because, like if this happens to kids who maybe their parents wanted them to be a doctor, and they want to be an artist or something. And so the parents' expectations of what their child's going to be, can also be very difficult to deal with. And so parents oftentimes will have the expectation that their child is going to be straight or heterosexual, and will be what we call cisgender, meaning that whatever sex they were assigned at birth. So if they gave birth to a child that they were told was a boy, that this child is going to grow up to be a man, right? And so that's their expectation. When a child comes out as being, queer or trans, now they've crashed those expectations, and parents oftentimes deal with grief around that. If parents have negative views of what it means to be LGBT or Q, in all of these situations, they may say things to the child before the child ever even comes out. They may be giving messages that turns out research shows are very traumatic for a child to hear.
Yeah.
So if a child hears, for example, that LGBTQ people are going to hell, and that child knows in their heart that they might be, queer or trans, that's a very negative message that can traumatize them, keep them from coming out, for one thing, but also can create mental health problems. And so research shows that children that grow up in homes where there's a lot of what they call rejecting messages. So you're going to go to hell, or, why can't you be more like a girl? Or why can't you act more like a boy? Or if they have come out, hey, you're not allowed to have gay friends over, or please don't tell your grandparents, or all kinds of things are actually as traumatic and harmful to a child as if the parent beat them up.
Yeah. Wow.
And their risk for things like suicide attempts are 8.5 times greater than kids from low rejecting homes. Their odds of their risk of getting involved with drug abuse and alcohol abuse goes up, I think, 3.5 times. And their ability to see themselves and to have a happy life goes way down.
Yeah.
So what's important is for parents to learn. I'm not here to tell someone, hey, you shouldn't believe this. God didn't say this. This isn't what the Bible says. So that's not something that I'm here to tell a parent, but more, hey, if you say these things to your child and your child happens to be LGBT or Q, even if they haven't come out to you yet, if your son, for example, seems to you to not, to be more feminine than you'd want him to be, and you keep telling him you need to act more like a boy, that just that alone can be traumatizing.
Yeah.
And so to teach them, behavior is important, whatever you believe. And of course, the hope would be that they'd be able to accept and affirm their child. If their child has already come out, it's really important for them to understand this is still the child you have always loved. You've just learned something new about them. They were always this. You just didn't know it.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is very, very valid. I have a friend in Chicago who has a best friend who is gay. She's actually transitioned into, to the male. And what happened was the girl realized the negative stigma that was attached to the LGBTQ community from her family members. And what she did was she went to college and came out. For the first 2 years, the girl did not come home to visit because she was transitioning. So finally, there was a death in the family. And so she was kind of like, not forced, but for lack of a better term, she was strongly encouraged by her mom to come attend his funeral. Well, when she came home to the memorial service, she was obviously the white elephant in the room, so to speak, because nobody had saw her for 2 years. And her mom immediately disowned her. It wasn't even about the loved one that passed. It was all about, the girl who transitioned. Her mom disowned her. To this day, this girl has a lot of mental challenges because of the way her mom treated her. Her mom doesn't have any communication with her at all. But the aunt embraced her, kind of took her in. The girl actually ended up dropping out of school because it was too traumatic for her. So she ended up moving in with her aunt. And so the girl's mother and the aunt, is into it. They don't have any communication because the mother of the daughter feels like, if I disown her, why are you accepting of her? But the aunt train of thought was, she's still my niece, like I still love her. I'm sorry, so many words. I still love her no matter what. She's still the same person she was before she left college and blah, blah, blah. And it definitely has put a rift in the family.
So let me ask a clarifying question, because you use different terms and I'm not sure. You said that this person transitioned,
Yeah,
but you also said this person was gay. So is this somebody who was assigned female at birth and then
correct.
identifies as a man?
Correct. That's
Okay.
that's why I said excuse me. Correct.
So
Yes.
his pronouns would be he, him, or
Yeah.
and possibly they, them, since I don't know them. And some trans
Yeah.
people will still use they, them, even though their appearance may look like he, him,
Yeah.
even if they go on testosterone, etc. I actually have an adult child who identifies as non-binary and
Okay.
uses they, them pronouns, but they are also taking testosterone. So
So
yeah.
Pashi, can you break down the meaning of each pronoun in the LGBTQ community for those of us who may not know? Like for me, I'm doing an interview, but it's also an educational moment for me as well.
So pronouns are what we use to talk about someone in the third person. And we're used to using for people that we think are women, okay, that look to us like women, we would use she, her. And for people that we think look to us like men, we automatically go to he, him. But that is not necessarily, just because someone appears to be a certain gender doesn't mean that's their gender identity. So one thing about pronouns is to not assume, but rather to find out how someone identifies. There are people who identify along what we call the gender binary, and binary means two. So there are people who see themselves as either a man or a woman, two genders, but in reality, there's multiple genders. There's all kinds of cultures and history that recognize what some people call a third gender or multiple genders. The big umbrella term would be like non-binary or gender queer, meaning the person doesn't identify as male or female. They might identify as both. They may identify as nothing, like they don't have a gender. They may identify as a mixture. Some people might identify along the spectrum, so they might feel a little bit more feminine or a little bit more masculine, but they're still not all the way there. For people that don't use she or he pronouns, they may use they, them. That's probably the most common that we're used to. And in fact, they, them, theirs is what we default to when we don't know someone's gender. So for example, let's say I was going to go see a brand new dentist, but I don't know the gender of Dr. Smith, right? So I would say to somebody, I'm going to go see this brand new dentist. I hope they're gentle. I don't know anything about them, except that my friend went to see them and said they were good, right? And we would say it that way and wouldn't think twice about it. But the minute someone tells you that their pronouns are they, them, theirs, you suddenly, freak out. Oh my God, how am I going to do this? When we do it all the time and have been doing it for over 600 years.
Yeah.
Using they, them, theirs. Then there are pronouns that are non-binary that maybe you aren't as familiar with. So mine are up on the screen. I use z, zers. I do identify as non-binary. I could be considered gender fluid, meaning that there are times in my life when I feel more feminine and times in my life when I feel more masculine, recognizing that feminine and masculine are very socially constructed terms. And what is feminine today might not have been considered feminine 100 years ago, and all of that. So it gets kind of a little bit tricky. There's also people who use other non-binary pronouns like am, air. I'm trying to think of and some of the spelling is different. Some people, instead of z, zers, it's z, here's, or z, zers. There's like a, and some are more popular depending on what part of the country you're in. The most important thing to know about pronouns is to honor them.
Yeah.
If you're not sure what someone's pronouns are, you can ask them before you can use, they, them, theirs if you don't know what someone's pronouns are. The other important thing is to use the person's pronouns, whether they're in your presence or not. In the same way that you would use a person's name. Like I wouldn't call you Jesse to your face, but then when I'm talking about you to someone else, decide to call you Robert. Yeah. Right? That would be silly. Yeah. But and it would also not be fair if I use she, her pronouns with you when you weren't in my presence just because I felt like doing that. Yeah. Right. So I do realize it's a newer thing for some people. And we used to say, and a lot of people will say preferred pronouns, but that's actually not a good way to talk about it because preference makes it sound like you don't have to do it. It's just what you prefer. Kind of like if you said to somebody, do you want chicken or fish? And someone says, well, I prefer the fish. And then you'd go back to them and say, oh, we're out of fish. And they'd say, okay, then I'll take the chicken. But you can't do that with pronouns, right? It's not that you get to pick. A person's pronouns are their pronouns. If you really don't know or are uncomfortable, you can also use the person's first name. But as you and I practiced before this even started, using the person's first name can get really clunky.
Yes.
Really fast.
Yeah.
But there are some people that is what they want you to use is just their first name. And in fact, as I was exploring my gender identity and wasn't sure where I was landing, that is what I asked people to do for me. In the beginning.
Nice. Let's talk a little bit about your you as a child. I want to know a little bit about your background. Like, where are you originally from? And I'm going somewhere with this, by the way. Where are you originally from? Are you from Sacramento, Ohio, Hawaii?
So I was born in Flatbush, Brooklyn, and I consider that like where my heart, was born and lived. But my father, for reasons we won't go into, ripped us away from all of our family and everyone that we would have been supportive to us and moved us to California. And so I spent the majority of my childhood and adult life in California.
Okay, wow. And so as a child, did you realize that, and I'm trying to say this carefully so you can correct me, back then, I'm gonna say back then, did you realize that you were gay or like same sex, or how did that go for you? I guess that's what I'm trying to ask.
So it's really interesting because, first of all, today's children, and I can't say that all children, but a lot of today's children have access to social media, television shows, etc., where the idea of two female people being together, two male people being together, or bisexuality being a thing, is something that people talk about, and they don't always talk about it in negative terms. Like there's even a movie coming out, or it just came out Friday, where there's a gay couple, superhero couple, right? When I was a child, you never saw any of that.
Yeah.
When I was a child, being homosexual, which is what they called it, was considered a mental illness.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And they called them male homosexuals and female homosexuals. It was the LGBT community at the time that used terms like gay and lesbian, but the medical community used terms like male and female homosexual, and it was considered a mental illness until 1973. I was a teenager when they removed that from the book that there's a book called the DSM that lists all the mental illnesses. And my dad was a psychiatrist. So trust me, I knew that
Yeah.
it was a mental illness.
Okay.
I also knew from things that my dad said that the worst thing a woman could be was a dyke. And
Yeah,
that's the
that
term
term.
he
That term. Yeah.
used.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
and so I knew that was not okay.
Yeah.
I had feeling now that I look back, okay, I had feelings that I can remember from the age of like 5. I didn't have a name for them. I didn't know what they meant.
Yeah.
So maybe if I'd had language, I could have said way back when, I want to be married to a girl, but I didn't
Yeah.
know that then. But I did have thoughts and feelings that I now identify, because when I tried to think of those same situations, but with boys in the picture, which boys, I always had friends that were boys. That's who I wanted to be friends with a lot. I tried to then put my friends in these same little scenarios, and it was like, oh no, that doesn't work for me. But I
Yeah.
didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
So that's as a child. I'm assuming child means prior to adolescence, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when did you come out and how was that for you? What made you come out? I guess, and when did you come out? This is a twofold question.
So I have a very interesting coming out story, because I tried to come out 5 different times in my life. And it was only the 5th time when I was finally believed and I really, really came out. But I was
Yeah.
kind of roadblocked the other times. And when I do my LGBTQ trainings, I usually tell this story at the very, very end. So I'll try and truncate it because it's like a 15-minute story.
Go for it. I mean, because I think it's like, I really think it's important that people hear this, because there may be people that hear this, that it would assist them with their coming out journey.
Okay. So, well, I will tell you that I grew up, first of all, you need to know I grew up in Orange County, which we jokingly say behind the orange curtain. I grew
Yeah.
up before Ellen DeGeneres came out on TV. I
Oh,
grew up
wow. Okay.
before the internet. So this is really important to know that. So I only had, and I grew up at a time when everything you always wanted to know about sex had first come out.
Yeah.
And when I've gone back now as an adult and reread that, the things that he says about gay men and lesbians is just horrific,
Yeah.
just awful. And those were the images I had of what
Yeah.
that meant to be gay. So I will tell you that I couldn't identify with those images.
Yeah.
So that when I thought maybe I'm gay, it's like, but I'm not this or this. So how could, I do know that I started having fantasies, same-sex fantasies, when I was like 14, that were real, that were sexual fantasies.
Yeah.
And I wrote that off as, well, I had a boyfriend who lived, far away from me. I didn't get to see him very often. So if I thought about him, it made me sad because I missed him. If I tried to think about other boys, I felt like I was cheating on him. But if I thought about girls, I felt like, oh, I'm not cheating on him, and this works for me. So that was like my rationalization. I didn't think I was gay.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
was just a handy thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
When I was 16, I now know that what I did was I fell in love with my best friend.
Yeah.
Now I'd already had boyfriends to this point. I had been with boys. I was still a virgin and all of that, but I'd been with boys. I'd made out with boys and all that. So that's
Yeah.
another confusing thing, because I didn't like not enjoy that. I did.
Yeah.
Right. So, but I fell in love with my best friend, and we had some intimacy,
Yeah.
and she must have told her mother. And her mother pulled me aside and said, you need to stop doing this with my daughter. And I went from being on cloud 9, thinking this is wonderful, I'm so in love, to feeling totally ashamed.
Yeah.
And my best friend said, we shouldn't do this anymore. I don't, and at the time I didn't have language to talk about it. But I did a little while later, in a fit of anger, which I'm going to tell every single person out there, do not come out to your parents in anger.
Yeah.
That's not the time. Don't do it at Christmas. Don't do it at somebody's
Yeah.
birthday.
Yeah.
Those aren't the times. But of course, I was 16 and I didn't know. And I don't even remember what the fight was about. But
Yeah.
I said, well, yeah, well, let me tell you, I'm bisexual.
Yeah.
That's what I first came out as, which is very common. And some people
Yeah.
who are bisexual, of course, come out as bisexual, but some people who are gay or lesbian will also come out as bisexual to begin with, partly because it makes you half normal, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense. Like there's still hope for you. And my mother burst into tears and was hysterical. And my dad, the psychiatrist, said, well, I've always known you wanted to be a boy. Now, that was a common belief back then, that lesbians wanted to be boys or men and that gay men wanted to be women, because if a woman is attracted to another woman, who's attracted to women? Men are, so they must want to be a man, right?
Yeah.
That was a common, which is not true. This and that's not true at all. Freud got it really wrong if that's who started that. But I didn't want to be a boy. And so it didn't make sense to me. And so I just shut up about it.
Yeah.
So that was my first try at coming out, and it didn't go very well. So then I went off to college, fast forward, and I'm like 19 years old. And I'd had some experiences my freshman year in college with girls that were what we call bi-curious, meaning they're probably not gay or bisexual. They just want to try it out. And so
Yeah.
they often tend to go towards people who are willing to maybe try that with them, but they're not
Yeah.
really emotionally invested. So I had my heart broken a couple of times, and I still didn't know what that meant. Because remember, I still had a boyfriend.
Yeah.
And because that's what you're supposed to do. And I was raised that that's what you're
Yeah.
supposed to do. You're supposed to get
Yeah.
guys to like you and get married and have children. That's how you have children. So I went to see a therapist after my freshman year, and I said, I think I might be gay. And she said to me, let's talk about your relationship with your father. And I didn't want to talk about my relationship with my father. That was also another common myth, that somehow people who are gay don't have a good relationship with their opposite sex parent. I'm going to say opposite.
Yeah.
So lesbians don't have a good relationship with their dad. Gay men don't have a good relationship with their mom. And that's why they're the way they are. That's not true, by the way. That again is a myth. I didn't want to talk about my relationship with my dad at that point in time. And so I never went back. And then I ended up fast forward. I got married to a man. I wanted to have children. That was the only way I knew to have children.
Yeah.
If I had known that I could have married a woman and had children with a woman, again, that's a choice I might have made.
Yeah.
Had I not been sent to a Catholic college, but had gone to the college I wanted to go to, I might have been exposed to other gay men and lesbians and other people, and I might have come out sooner. But I didn't have any access, and I didn't have, so I married. And it's not that I didn't love him. I did. I loved him very much. And we had a child, got married, had a child. And I had a very toxic upbringing. So at a certain point, my depression really hit, and I ended up going into therapy. And when I felt comfortable with this therapist, I finally told her about what happened to me when I was 16 with my best friend.
Yeah.
And so that was another try at coming out. That's try number 3.
Yeah.
And she said to me, oh, all girls experiment. That doesn't mean you're gay. She didn't ask me, so do you have fantasies? Were you attracted to anybody else? Did you have any other experiences? What makes you, what made you attracted to her or anything else? She just wrote it off.
Yeah.
And so I thought, oh, I guess I'm not gay. See, all along, and I thought that the feelings I had towards women were just what all women felt. I thought all women like to see naked women, for example.
Yeah.
Because look at the cover of Cosmopolitan. Those are semi-nude women.
Yeah.
The few times that I went to see a porno movie, oh, shocking. But, my husband wanted to see a porno movie.
Yeah.
There were always scenes between two women. And I figured, oh, those were the scenes for the women, because the rest of the scenes to me seemed a little bit gross.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
because I didn't like men, but because they're just, a little gross.
Yeah.
So I just rationalized my way through it. Then a couple of years later, same therapist. I just felt like I had to tell her. And I said, I go to sleep every night imagining that I will find a woman who will love me for who I am and who will think I'm beautiful.
Yeah.
And again, instead of asking me more about it, she pathologized it and said that just
Yeah.
means that you want to have a symbiotic relationship with a woman like you have with your mother. What I heard, what I thought that meant was I wanted to have sex with my mother, which is very disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I went deep underground. I
Yeah.
went deep underground. So that was try number 3.5, let's just say.
Yeah.
Fast forward, another child, and I was pregnant. And at that point, I had met some gay people because they had a group that would come meet in our synagogue library, and I became friends with them. I was like the straight ally in their
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
But when I was 8 months pregnant, I took this gay man, I invited him over, and I told him every single thing, every feeling, every sexual experience, every the feeling that if I didn't have a woman in my life, I felt like I was going to die.
Yeah.
And he said to me, "Oh, honey, that doesn't mean you're gay. You're just pregnant. Women have times in their lives when they feel they need other women in their lives. This doesn't mean you're gay." I never let him forget that, by the way, because that was
Yeah.
a horrible thing to say. What he saw was, oh my God, Pashi is married, has 2 children with another one on the way. I don't want Pashi to be gay. That would be
Yeah.
terrible. Right.
Yeah.
So he told me I wasn't gay. So that was try
Yeah.
number 4.
Yeah.
And then when my son was 8 months old, I met a lesbian. And one night during a phone call, I told her my story and she believed me.
Yeah. Wow.
And that was the beginning. Now, I was 41 years old
Yeah.
at
Wow.
that point. And that was
Yeah.
the beginning of my coming out. And it turned my life upside down. I will tell you that.
Wow. Let's talk a little bit about the upside down. You don't have to talk about things that you're uncomfortable with, but I do, once again, I want people to hear this and I wanted to be able to speak to them and help them along their journey. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you went through once you was finally out.
So when I was finally out, remember again, because I came out as an adult, that
Yeah.
did make a difference. But I will tell you, there are a lot of adults who come out as adults. And because many lesbian, gay, bisexual people get married in what appears to be a heterosexual marriage because that's what you're supposed to do, oftentimes they come out in the context of their marriage.
Yeah.
And if there's children, that makes it even more difficult.
Yeah.
And in my case, I'm going to tell you that it wasn't so much that my husband was a man. He was the wrong person for me, and our marriage was already falling apart way before
Yeah.
I came out. And in fact, had I been out, I might not have chosen the wrong person.
Yeah.
Because when you hide a piece of yourself, you hide all of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But at any rate, there are people who come out during marriage, and mostly it's gay and bisexual men. Half of those marriages break up right away. But of the 50% that don't break up right away, half of those marriages stay, which is what is the normal marriage statistics now anyway. So just because someone comes out doesn't mean that their marriage is going to end. However,
Yeah.
for people who are lesbians, especially, it usually is, that's the end of the marriage because straight men have a really hard time with having a lesbian wife.
Yeah.
So for me, it was very, very difficult. It was, but there were 2 things. It was like, for one thing, I'd gone through my whole life feeling empty. Like I had an emptiness inside of me that I could never fill. And I couldn't fill it with therapy. I couldn't fill it with children. I couldn't fill it with buying things. I couldn't fill it. Nothing I did. When I came out was the only time, however, because of all the ramifications, that I thought that maybe my children would be better off if I were dead than to have a
Wow.
lesbian mom.
Wow. Yeah.
Um, but as I was having those thoughts of suicide, I didn't feel empty. I never
Yeah.
again felt empty. And I had gone through most of my life not doing a really good job at feeding myself. I wasn't anorexic, like because of, it wasn't the, oh, I want to look thin. I just didn't
Yeah.
think I was worth feeding.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't go out of my way to feed myself. And after I came out, that ended.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So many people, I really hope people watch this show and really grasp what you're saying to them, because a lot of people are in that boat. I think some people really dramatize liking the opposite sex to be able to hide, that there may be just a little bit of drop of that going on the inside. They don't want to face it, or they want to deny it, or because of society, whatever the reason may be. And they go through life, just kind of being really unhappy. When not to share this before, when my nephew came out, that was, we didn't know, but when my sister called, I was very supportive of her. But my whole thing, let me talk to him, because I knew this must have been truly difficult for him. People in the family, they were trying to figure out what happened. What happened? Did he get molested by a priest? Or they were just all these assumptions, because he act like a straight male, but then when I got a chance to talk to him and, and just really, encourage him and support him in his decision, then, that really, really helped, because his father's like a man's, and it's a shame that these kids or teenagers have to go through that. Someone commit suicide, someone are bullied, depressed, anxiety, all that, all because they want to be who they are, but they can't, or they choose not to be, because of what society has put in place as to what they feel humans should be, so to speak, in regard to the sexual orientation.
Yeah. And you said something really interesting, like, oh, was maybe he got molested. This is a
Yeah,
common this is a common belief. So I'm going to flip this over,
yeah,
because we only think that if the child turns out to be gay or lesbian. We do
correct.
not think that if the child ends up being straight. So
Yes.
so if you think about this, if let's say a boy was molested by a priest, and
Mhm.
then the boy ends up, marrying a woman, we never say, well, maybe he would have been gay, but this terrible experience with this priest,
Mhm.
caused him then to turn to women. We never say that. But
Yeah,
if this child happens to be gay, and gay boys have higher rates of sexual abuse, and that's not what makes them gay, but the fact that they are gay, the fact that often they give off these vibes, or they're more vulnerable because they
yeah,
know there's something about them that's not acceptable, so they're more of a target for child molesters, for example.
yeah.
um, if this child instead turns out to be gay, we think, oh, well, it was because they were sexually abused.
Hmm.
But the
Yeah,
research shows that that doesn't seem to pan out, because if that were actually true, most victims of childhood sexual abuse are girls, right?
yes, that's correct.
Most of the perpetrators are men. So
Hmm.
if it were true that having childhood sexual abuse caused you to become gay or lesbian, you'd have way more lesbians out there.
Hmm.
Um, so there's tons of women out there who were victims of childhood sexual abuse at the hands of men, and sometimes at the hands of women, who go on to be straight, and we never question that.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So
You
what
know,
we're really saying is that being gay and lesbian is a bad thing, and being a victim of childhood sexual abuse is a bad thing. Therefore, a bad thing equals a bad thing.
yeah,
But we never say a
exactly.
bad thing could equal a good thing.
Right, correct. So do you think that culturally it's more accepted in some cultures more over than others?
Oh, being LGBT or Q.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think culturally there seems to be differences. I had a focus group with a number of Asian youth, and I heard over and over from them that their parents kind of conflated being gay with mental illness. So that if they were depressed, it was because they were gay. And if they would stop being gay, they wouldn't be depressed. And if they were, and that if they were depressed, that's what was making them gay. So if they stopped being depressed, they wouldn't be gay anymore. Just, so obviously that's a situation. I do know that there's other cultures, other ethnicities and races where maybe I don't know if this is as true anymore, but certainly when I began my career, I heard a lot from African-American people that being LGBTQ is a white thing. And I don't hear that so much anymore, but I'm sure there's still that old school belief that this is just something white people do. Black people don't do this.
That has definitely, I've heard it, just to be transparent with you, in some circles. And I think a lot of that train of thought was because it was considered taboo within the Black race, because we as men and women of being African-American descent, we are taught to be strong and bold and confident, and how dare you, and so it was, and it still is to a certain extent, highly looked down upon. And so that's the excuse. So I just, that's what Caucasians, the white folks do, and things like that. But
it makes kind of sense in the sense that there's so much racism and so much oppression that you're already facing as a person of color. Exactly. To add another layer, I mean, I could see as a parent even saying, "Oh my God, I don't want my kid." I mean, with my white privilege, when my son came out as gay, my first thought was, "Oh my God, he's going to be in so much danger."
Yeah.
But especially because I knew that he was the effeminate type of gay man. He's the type of gay man that will get beat up, right? So I was terrified for him. And it wasn't that I was unhappy that he was gay or that I thought being gay was bad. I was just terrified for him. And so I could totally understand that. You are, there's already enough to be terrified of as a Black person, or a person of color, as a BIPOC person. And so, I mean, I could see why adding this on. And then if you believe that maybe this is just something that white people do, because it is so important to keep your racial and ethnic identity in place. As someone who's Jewish, I will tell you that a lot of Jewish thoughts and beliefs are about we're not them, right?
Yes,
we don't eat pork because the other people eat pork,
exactly.
Right? So I get it. I do know that certain, not all, but certain indigenous peoples do have words and acceptance and places for people and non-Western cultures, especially. So one of the things that colonization has done is taken that away. So it's, again, white people took it away, which is, kind of ironic then, the idea that, oh, this is a white people thing, but it's white people that actually, the white Christian people that came in and said, this is bad, you shouldn't do this.
Yeah. So how can a person, in your opinion, how can a person who have never had sex identify with a certain sexual orientation?
That's a really good question. And you know what? We never ask that of straight kids. So if you have a 5-year-old little girl who says, I'm going to grow up and marry a man and have babies, we never say to her, oh, sweetie, you don't know that yet. You haven't had sex yet. You might be a lesbian. You might be bisexual. Maybe you won't even like sex. You have no idea. We never say that. But if that same little girl said, I want to grow up and marry a girl and have babies with another girl, we would be, oh, honey, you can't know that. You haven't had sex yet. And so it's really important to understand that even though we call it sexual orientation, that term came about years and years and years ago. This is not about sex. This is about love. There are straight people who know that they're straight and who know that who they're going to fall in love with way before they ever have sex. We never question that at all. And in fact, for people who are, like, for example, extremely religious, they don't have sex or anything with their fiance or their whatever intended until they're married. How would they
Yeah.
possibly know, right? And
Yeah.
yet we totally accept that.
Yeah.
And there are people also who will have the audacity to say to someone who's gay or lesbian, who maybe has never had sex with anyone but someone of the same sex, well, maybe it's just because you haven't tried it. Like somehow
Yeah.
that's the thing, right? But this isn't just about sex.
Yeah.
This is about love. This is about romance. Sexual attraction is actually kind of a different thing. Because you can be romantically attracted and not have any sexual feelings at all, because there are people in this world who are asexual, who either don't have sexual feelings or have very limited sexual feelings, or only have sexual feelings in a certain, but we call it sexual orientation because that's what it was called.
Yeah.
So if being straight, if you can know you're straight without having sex, you can know you're gay or lesbian without having sex.
Oh, that's a powerful statement. Very powerful. Do you think that, because I think there are a lot of people who hide in the shadows. I think a lot of people identify as being straight are actually bisexual or low-key gay. And their mannerisms are of being the cisgender, meaning the gender that they are assigned to. So do you think that a gay person can, do you think they could pick up the fact that this person appears to be straight, but I see something, I can sense something or discern something a little bit different than what they put off?
So first of all, I've never heard the term low-key gay. So
Yeah.
I think that's cute.
That's the ghetto term.
Is that the ghetto term? What does low-key gay mean?
Yeah,
like that is that like bisexual, or is that's just doing it on the down low?
Exactly, doing it down low. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So okay, great. Thank you for teaching me a new term.
Yeah.
So first of all, I think what you're talking about maybe is gaydar. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Like, how would they know?
Yeah.
How is it that someone's gay if they don't say they're gay or don't identify as they're gay? So first of all, let's just also say that gender identity and sexual orientation are two very, very, very different things. You can actually have someone whose gender expression, for example, if they were assigned male at birth, their gender expression might be more feminine, and they could also be straight.
Mm-hmm.
But they might be read as gay because we assume if someone who looks to be a man is a little bit more effeminate, that in this society that means they're gay. Now, you go to a country like England, and a lot of the men there, compared to how we are here, would appear to be gay when they're not. They're totally straight. And in fact, again, being a Jew, when Jewish men came to this country, they did not fit the standards of masculinity and masculine behavior. That's something that they had to learn, because in the old country, they did a lot of studying, and the wives were the one oftentimes that were out earning the living so that their husbands could study and do things. So it's kind of it's very cultural, what is actually feminine and masculine. But that's what you're reading. You're reading someone's gender expression. And here's what's really funny. When I came out, all the gay people in our congregation said to me that they thought it was my husband who was gay.
No way, really?
I didn't come across as gay. And in fact, it's only since I've cut my hair that people started to read me as gay or queer. Up until then, I could fool anybody. I just don't ping on people's gaydar at all.
And you do not.
I don't. No,
you don't.
And which is a little frustrating to me, but my ex-husband does. And what's really interesting is his female partner, that they're not married, but they've been together for years and years and years. When we first met her, we thought, oh my God, he's fallen in love with another lesbian, because she seemed, she was her gender, her feelings, her vibes were very dykish.
Masculine.
Yeah, very masculine.
Yeah. Did you say thuggish?
I said dykish.
Dyke. Okay, dyke. That's the old term.
Yeah. So here's a situation where you have straight women who are tomboys, look at motorcycle gangs. I mean, look at how the women in those motorcycle gangs come off as very masculine looking, but they're straight. So just remember, gender identity, gender expression are different than sexual orientation. You can have someone who's a man's man who's gay.
Yes, absolutely.
And that man's man may be attracted to other men's men, or maybe attracted to someone who's more feminine. And you know, it doesn't matter, but that's what we mean by gaydar. However, I have heard, and I am not a gay man, I'm going to say that right now. I'm not a gay man, but I have heard gay men tell me that they can tell by a look at how someone looks, and they can tell across the room. I don't know if they can pick up on someone who is identifying as straight, but isn't really straight. You know, who hasn't come out to themselves is what I guess I want to say. But I have heard that gay men know how to signal each other. I don't know if that's true or if that's true for everybody. I do know there's something, I do know that my wife can somehow identify people as gay. And I don't see it. So does that, I don't know if that helps. I have much better Judar. I see the Jews out there. That's who I can tell.
No, and the reason I asked that only because my nephew and I had a conversation a couple of years ago about this, and because he called me Uncle Jesse, and he was saying how he can tell. He said Uncle, because he acts, when I say like a man's man, he's you know, but he was saying how he can tell. He said, like, I can just tell, like, you know, the look. He said sometimes when they get around gay men, they try to act more masculine or more like they're trying to hide something. You know what I'm saying? And he said, Uncle Jesse, every time. And my nephew is very bold. He said he'll go and just talk, and he said with the intent of trying to clarify if what he's picking up is correct. And he would say, Uncle Jesse, yep, and it would just come out of the conversation. But he said, if you're looking at the physical appearance, then you'll be fooled, is what he said.
Yeah, and there's a vibe, and there's like, I will tell you, it's not 100% accurate, because how many times have you heard of straight men who've been approached by a gay man and they're totally offended? They're totally offended. And I do want to say this to all the straight men out there, that women get approached by straight men all the time that they're not interested in. And they don't beat them up and they don't get offended. They just say, no, I'm not interested. So if a gay man comes up to you and seems to be interested in you, you know, you're not any more in danger than those straight women are in danger from you. You're just like, oh, thank you. I'm flattered. I'm glad you find me attractive. I don't go that way, you know? So it doesn't work 100% of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we got one more minute before the show close. As you know, time go really quick. What do you want to leave the audience regarding this topic before we leave? Because I think overall, to me, this was a really good show. I think it's very educational. And I think for those who watch this show that can identify with the information that's being shared, I think this will make things a little bit easier for them if they're trying to come out. So what are your final remarks?
I would say the most important thing is to understand that a person's sexual orientation or gender identity is not a choice. They didn't choose to do this. They didn't choose to feel this way any more than you chose to be straight or you chose to identify with the sex you were assigned at birth. And I'm also going to tell you that if you say, oh, I did choose, I was attracted to men, but I chose to be straight and married a woman, then you didn't choose that. You chose how to behave, but you didn't choose how you feel in your heart. No one chooses how they feel in their heart. That if you loved this person before you knew that how they identified, you should love this person after. They aren't doing this to hurt you. They are doing this to be who they are. And that if you love this person and don't want them to die and don't want them to be miserable and depressed and anxious and have a horrible life, continue to love them and support them. That's what I would ask.
Thank you, Pashi, so much for being a guest on the show. And that was a really good closing remarks. That's it for this edition of Mental Health Matters. If you enjoyed this particular show, If you would like to be a guest on our show, or if you would like a DVD copy of this show, please dial 916-366-4600. Thank you.